Hey everybody, this is Jim with Harvest Harmonics, and welcome to another episode of Innovations in Agriculture. And today is May 27th, 2022, and we're just kind of rolling into Memorial Day weekend here, where most of us are either just um, getting ready for a 3-day weekend, or if you're farmers or people like us who work with farmers, there is no such thing as a 3-day weekend, right? There's hardly such thing as a 2-day weekend. But in any case, today's episode in Innovations in Agriculture, I kind of wanted to geek out a little bit, because we get these questions every now and then. I mean, generally, when we talk to farmers, their main concern is, hey, you got a product, you're looking to sell it, obviously. I just want to know that it works, right? I want to know that if I purchased your product, that if I invest money in your product, that your product is going to return that investment, not only in, of course, money in terms of more profit, but it's also going to, have some kind of positive benefit on my business. And so on that basis, most of the people that are jumping on board with us are just looking at our case studies and looking at the science. The science kind of makes sense, and they're looking at our case studies and they say, well, they're getting all these results and they give a money back guarantee. So with those two factors, I mean, it just makes sense that we should just jump on board with this, right? And most farmers will start off with, let's say, if you have a thousand, you know, 1,000 acres, or hectares or whatever, you may start off with 10 or 20 acres, or even a few acres, whatever, just to prove it to yourself that it works. And that's how most people get started. And of course, then once they see the results, they jump on board and they order for a much bigger chunk of their farm or their whole farm as a whole. Other farmers just like to say, they say, wow, I want to get the most benefit, the most bang for my buck. I want to make the most money I possibly can. I'm going to place a big order with you for hundreds or even thousands of acres, and I want to make that money this year. I don't want to wait. And of course, both of those approaches are totally valid. It's just a matter of whether you want to really maximize your profit right away, or if you just kind of a little more skeptical, a little more cautious. You want to start off and want to prove it works first. And either way is totally fine with us. But today, for non-farmers, and usually this is from agronomists, or not even really agronomists always, but just certain types of researchers or agronomists or people with engineering backgrounds, they're not so much interested in purchasing the product or whether it works. They have to kind of know how it works first, right? They kind of want to know how this thing works, how the whole thing operates, and before they even really worry about the results. And those types of people, well, of course, we're totally willing to make those explanations, but those types of people tend to be more like, okay, I really need to know how this stuff works. So for today's episode, I thought I'd appease those guys. I thought I'd kind of go into a little bit more depth about how this whole thing works and really kind of geek out a little bit on the science. So if you're not a science guy, or you're not a technical guy, this episode may not be for you. Maybe you just want to give us a call, or go to our website and fill out a request for quote form, and we'll help you make some more money. And if you're the kind of guy who says, I don't need to know how all this stuff works, I just want to know that it works, and I want to know that you're going to give me my money back if it doesn't. So for those guys, of course, all you guys need to do is fill out a request for quote, and we'll be happy to work with you. For everybody else, let's geek out a little bit here, and I'm going to actually share my screen here with you in 1 second. And this is actually comes from a blog page. Oops, there we go. Sorry, I have to share my screen. Okay, good. So this is actually one of our blog posts, and this was a post that we did back in 2021, last year, a little over a year ago. But I always refer back to this post, and the reason I refer back to this post is because while we talk about a number of different things on our blog, everything from fertilizer efficiency to case studies to scientific topics to just current events type stuff. This particular episode was this particular blog article was written really kind of to summarize a lot of research, because a lot of times, with us being sort of a new company, been around for 7 years, but a newer company, newer product, new science, coming into the field of agriculture, one of the first things that people kind of think is, oh, these are just guys, some guys, some random guys coming out of left field and come up with this crazy idea, right? It turns out that this technology is actually based upon a long history of research into sound manipulation, frequency manipulation, direct biophysics manipulation, and these other types of research paths. Now, these research paths don't get a lot of traction because, quite frankly, they're not funded by these giant chemical companies who have a vested interest in making sure that all the chemical and GMO and all those research trials are all, of course, well documented. But there is a lot of research involved in how frequencies can benefit plant health. And I wanted to kind of show you some of these research. Again, now the research that we've collated here in this article are not the research that went into the Kiminasi plant booster. These are independent researchers that study these different aspects. And there is quite a bit of of research behind it. So I just wanted to kind of go through again. The name of this blog article, if you want to do a search, is "The Effective Frequencies on Plants." Now, the really interesting thing, and it was March 18th, 2021, that we published this originally. But the interesting thing about this, the first question we get, the technical question we get, is how is this? How are your frequencies able to stay in water, especially after the water leaves the emitter, right? Because I think the common conception is when you're talking about frequencies, and even when you're talking about radio waves, most people think of sound waves. Okay, now sound wave is a particular type of wave. Okay, and it's called a compression wave. And what that means is as sound moves through the air or water or some kind of what we call it media, as sound goes through the air, let's say, what happens is it compresses the air molecules slightly. And then as it continues to move, as that sound wave moves through the air, it'll compress the air in front of it and then it will expand the air behind it. And that's how sound sort of moves through the air like this, right? Well, that type of wave is called a compression wave because you're compressing air molecules together and then you're expanding it again. And a compression wave, this is again, I told you guys I was going to geek out with you a little bit, so please stay with me here. A compression wave compresses the air. And so that type of wave, yes, it does require a continuous medium. In other words, if you were going through air and then all of a sudden you ran out of air, sound would no longer travel, right? So if you are in space, for example, you've seen all those Star Trek and Star Wars movies, right? The reality is you can't hear an explosion in space because there's no air molecules. There's nothing for that sound wave to compress against. So it basically just disappears almost instantly in space. You can't hear anything in space. But now let's compare that to radio waves and other electromagnetic waves, because obviously light can travel through space and can travel no matter if there's a medium or molecules or anything. Not, it's not a compression wave. So radio waves and electromagnetic waves and waves from the like light waves, for example, those are called transverse waves, and those kinds of waves don't require a medium to compress against, right? So a radio wave frequency, which is what we're using for the Cumanacea plant booster here, is not a compression wave. It doesn't need to compress the water molecules, and so it doesn't have to be a continuous stream of water in order for it to go from our system, our device, and an irrigation system to the plants. It's a transverse wave, meaning it can actually go from our transmitters through a metal pipe and then into the water, and the water is able to pick up these frequency patterns at the molecular level. So what our system is doing is essentially altering the frequency patterns within the molecular bonds of water, and those frequency patterns are then communicated to the plants via the physical laws of harmonics. Okay, so that's a common question we get as well. Once your water leaves that emitter, then you no longer have a circuit. They're thinking with like an electrical circuit, right? Or they're thinking with sound as a compression wave. But our system does not use sound. It uses frequencies based upon radio waves. Again, radio waves is a spectrum in a type of wave that doesn't require a continuous medium the way sound does. So hopefully that answers that question for those of you guys who have been asking me that, and hopefully that'll settle that curiosity for you. Now let's dig a little bit deeper into some of these studies. Now, in this blog article here, we have a chart here which actually explains that a lot of these researchers who have conducted experiments where they're actually looking for specific traits. Now, I'll give you an example here. In this study done by Gosh and others in 2016 here, they discovered that, for example, a frequency wave at 500 hertz can increase the expression of a defense-related genes. Now, if you watch some of our other shows, or you've seen some of our case studies where we've shown insect resistance and disease resistance in plants that are enhanced with the Kiminasi plant booster, you'll get an understanding of, well, how is it that some kind of wave is able to help improve insect resistance in a plant. Because what we're saying is our system is not a pesticide. We're not influencing the insects directly, right? And that's another question, which we'll get to in a second, about pollinators, and I'll get to that in a second. However, our system is not affecting, insects. It's not affecting the mites. It's not affecting the whiteflies. It's not affecting, the thrips and all the other stuff that you're trying to get rid of, right? But what our system is doing is at certain frequencies within our overall system, they've been pinpointed that actually enhance a plant's expression of a certain gene within the plant that triggers a biochemical response. In other words, if in a practical sense, if you have an insect, a predatory insect that lands on a leaf and starts eating the leaf of a plant, right? A plant will have its own biochemical defense mechanisms against that insect. In other words, it will change the chemistry of its leaves into something else, and it will cause that insect to become dissatisfied, almost like it's making a bad taste or something. And that insect will leave that plant and will go somewhere else. It will try to find a weaker plant or a plant that doesn't have as strong of a defense mechanism, right? The reason that happens is because insects are nature's garbage collectors, right? They tend to eat weaker plants in order to create fertilizer and make way for new plants and new generations of plants. But strong plants and healthy plants will have a nice, healthy biochemical response system against insects and will drive them away. So the insects start to avoid the treated fields with Cuminacea plant booster. Now let's take a look at another example. And I mentioned pollinators. So again, a question that I get quite often is, well, if your system is driving away insects, is that not going to cause pollinators like bees or wasps or other things that are pollinating the plants and causing a beneficial effect? Is that not going to drive them away too? And again, just as I mentioned, our system is not a signal that's repelling insects. Our system is a system that's enhancing the genetic defense mechanisms against predatory insects, not pollinators, but predatory insects. Insects that are eating the fruits and leaves and plants in which they become parasitical. In other words, they're destroying these plants or the fruits that they're creating. Okay. And this, again, this particular experiment, again, this is not our technology here, but this is an experimenter who used frequency patterns of around 500 hertz, and he noticed the expression of these defense-related genes were enhanced. And the same thing for that same 500 hertz frequency here, increased the expression of a mechanostimulus responsive gene. So what that means is, on the one hand, you might have uh, for example, a wind and stuff like that, a breeze or a wind or certain sunlight patterns. Plants have the ability to respond to these sort of mechanical stimuli as well. So if a plant has a pollinator that's going into its flower, in some cases if you had a microscope, you could see the plants are actually opening their flowers as they hear the sounds of buzzing or something of a pollinator, for example. And yet a predatory insect may trigger a defensive response. And so again, at 500 hertz or in that range, you'll see plants have a detailed response that's increased as well. Same study here also showed between 250 hertz, there's an increased expression of photosynthesis related proteins and genes. In other words, photosynthesis is being enhanced. Now, we've been saying since we launched this product in 2019 that our system makes photosynthesis more efficient. And this study is just approving, again, they don't have the entirety. Our system has over 3,100 unique frequency patterns at different, and it's not just the frequencies that we're using, but it's also the timing of how those frequencies are delivered to the plants that's important, that creates the effect of our system. And so even if you had all these systems from these studies here, you're not going to achieve nearly the results that you have with the Cuminacea plant booster. But I'm just kind of rolling through these again. There's another one here about Hassanine, increased yield in cotton, on cucumbers. Again, frequency patterns between 100 and 1,000 hertz, increasing yield on these two plants. Chrysanthemums, a type of plant here. This other researcher in 2004 noticed that frequencies around 1,400 hertz is able to change hormone levels in this chrysanthemum and increasing levels of soluble proteins here at 1,000 hertz, right? And this is a different study altogether. Again, lettuce, maize, peas, rice, spinach, strawberries, sweet peppers, tomatoes, all these different studies, and there's probably about, I don't know, 7 or 8, maybe 10 studies that are documented here, where each of these studies have been doing a lot of extensive research with lots of replications, and they're proving that these different frequencies in these ranges can influence and improve plant health in various ways. And they've done this on a number of different types of plants, and they're seeing a number of different types of responses. So if you guys want a copy of this blog article, you can send us your email. You can send us a message, and with your email, we'll be happy to send this to you. You can go on our website as well, and just fill out a request for quote form and say, please send me the link to your blog article on frequencies, and we'd be happy to send that over to you. But I just wanted to kind of address a few of these technical issues. So the reality is our system is not some new concept out of left field, but our system is really based upon a concept that if we could just make plants more efficient, okay, then we could really increase and improve agriculture in astronomical ways. And of course, the results that we've seen with the Kiminasi plant booster, yields of 20% and more, better insect resistance, better fungal resistance, better disease resistance, overall better soil health, better microbial function, and all these different things that we're seeing with Kiminasi plant booster just continues to validate the effectiveness of our technology. Now, the reality of it is a very complicated technology. I can't go into, even if I wanted to geek out here for 3 hours, I'm not going to go into all of the different the elements of our technology. First of all, most of the stuff is trade secret because we know that this system is so far advanced that people are not going to be able to replicate the advances in the technology of our system, and not for quite a while here. And second of all, and even more importantly, that most farmers are just interested, does it work? I want to know that it works, and I want to know that you're going to guarantee if it doesn't, right? So we've been promoting that, and we've been saying that for many years now. That is never going to go away because we're here to help farmers. We're not here to hurt farmers. We want to make sure you guys are getting good results on what you're doing, and of course, we want to help you. So I wanted to geek out a little bit here. There's a couple of other questions I'll answer here in a second. If you guys have specific technical questions, I'm happy to answer them for you in the next few minutes here. But I'm going to take a sip of water, and then I have a couple of other things that I want to kind of run through with you. So one other thing that I see here with Kiminasi, or a question I get quite often is, are there any university studies that proves this? Again, these are all university studies. Most of the research that we're doing is more on the practical side. We just want to prove that our technology can increase yield, it can improve insect resistance, it can improve tolerance to salinity and high sodium content soils, those types of things. So that's really where our focus is. Again, we're trying to take a practical approach from our particular research, but for any researcher who's out there who wants to really study this in depth, of course, we're happy to work out a trial for you and show you how our system can help. Another thing, let me actually pull this up here because I had a study that I was working on in FAQ. Hold on a second. Let me get over there. Technical FAQ. Okay, so this was something that I was basically working on here, but I wanted to kind of run through. It was a couple of the questions that I've been getting a lot lately. How does the system work? How does this how does the system work without power? So for those of you guys who don't know, our systems are little micro transmitters, which look like little computer chips here. These are activated by the flow of running water. There's no external power needed, so you don't have to hook it up to electricity. You don't have to put it next to a battery. These are self-contained. And the people ask us about, well, how does that work? Well, again, this is kind of a technical aspect here, but as water flows in a linear direction, right? Water has sort of we call it a polar molecule, meaning on one side you have a positive charge, that's hydrogen. On the other side of the molecule, there's a negative charge, and that's oxygen, right? So because of that polar nature of water, as it flows in a linear direction, it creates a magnetic field in a circular direction around the pipe. And that magnetic field is how our signals are communicated from the transmitters through the pipe and into the water. And then the water is able to store these signals at the molecular level, as I mentioned earlier. So it is a magnetic field that our system is not magnets. It's not magnetizing the water or doing that. It's not that kind of a treatment system, but it utilizes that magnetic field of flowing water to be able to carry the signals from the transmitters and into the water. And the last question that I get quite often here is, how is it that water is able to communicate these frequencies, or how do these frequencies actually work? Well, again, water, if you go on our science page, that's probably a good place to look. But our Brett Miller, our agricultural engineer, explains this, that water actually has these molecules, but the way that the atoms, the hydrogen atoms and the oxygen atoms within the water molecule interact, it almost operates like springs. In other words, there's very regular oscillations. Now, it turns out that any substance will have a very signature sort of frequency pattern that it operates at. In fact, there's an entire science called, um, called electroscopy. I never can pronounce this right. Electroscopy. I'm sorry, chromatic electroscopy. In other words, they can actually tell you what a substance is just by shining a laser through a particular substance, and then as the different molecular structure will have different. They can tell you what's in it. I don't even understand it. Believe me, it's actually in the video if you want to go check that out. In a nutshell, a certain molecule or any type of substance will have a very signature frequency pattern that the atoms within that molecule are operating at. And so by looking at that, we can actually say, okay, water normally operates at this frequency, right? However, we can actually interject a frequency pattern within the molecular structure of that water so that the atoms will actually operate at a different frequency. When you can do that, we're essentially changing the frequencies of water. And it turns out that water can hold this information for up to 3 weeks if you leave it in a glass vial. In the case of soil, in the case of a practical system in a farm, it can last for anywhere between, let's say, 5 to 10 days is what we've noticed here. But when the water molecule hits the root structure or hits the plant, right, and the plant absorbs that water molecule, it's that frequency pattern that interacts with the cells in the plant that are targeted at that similar or same frequency. And so if a cell is off a little bit where it should be, if it's maybe 3 or 4 hertz or cycles per minute different than where it should be, the frequency pattern that's attached to the water molecule is going to sort of recalibrate and retune the cells of that plant so that they're operating at their efficient best. Now, when that happens, we're essentially fine-tuning and recalibrating the entire metabolism of the plant. Again, there's a sequence that our system of frequencies operate at. And so one part of that sequence is going to help improve root structure. And one is going to help with, with other things, right? So just to let you guys know, this is a system that has been proven to work. We've proven this on hundreds of farms, and I wanted you guys to know how this works. So the simplicity of this is, guys, if you guys want more information about how this works and a more deeper dive, go to harvestharmonics.com and our science page, the science, and then of course you can learn and do a deep dive yourself and learn how this technology works. If you're like most people and you just want to know that it works and you just want to know that we guarantee that it will work, then give us a call. Let's work out a quote for your farm and let's work out the best way that you can take advantage of this amazing technology. That's all we got today, guys. I want to thank you so much for joining us here and have a great weekend. We'll see you again next week.